Okay. All right, welcome again. Welcome. This is Professor Guerra Pujol. Welcome to Summer A of Legal and Ethical Environment of Business. Let's jump in. This is an orientation class. And so what I'm going to do is, because I'm still working on the syllabus, I hope to post it either later today or at the latest first thing tomorrow morning, once I have some loose ends tied up. Let me go ahead and do a screen share provisional syllabus of the main aspects of the course. This is the stuff that's not going to change. So let's go ahead and do a screen share and pull this up. And all right, great. Let me first talk about our Summer A schedule, what we'll be doing. And again, as I was saying, because this is before I hit record, because this is an RA, reduced seating active learning, I believe is the actual, that's where the word real comes from, Matt. We have 5 labs, this orientation in 5 labs. And so what I've done is, to keep it simple, I'm going to create a module for each one of our classes or each one of our labs beginning today. So this class will meet on Tuesdays. And what I'll do is, right before our class meets on Tuesday, I'll open up that module. And that module will contain any reading that I may assign, any film clips or video clips that I may want you to watch, and also a quiz or a discussion post that will either, whichever it is, it'll be open book. So what I will do is I'll open up a new module every Tuesday, and you will have until the following Monday, until 11:59 p.m., a minute to midnight, which is, I can open it on Canvas. You'll have a full calendar week in order to complete whatever assignments and readings and film clips I may give you in the module. Now, you'll notice the module for this class, because it's an orientation, only consists of a 2-part academic activity. And because I have to follow university regulations regarding the academic activity, that academic activity, technically, the due date is this Friday. That's the one time that you have like an early due date. But rest assured that the academic activity, as per university regulations, remains open until the last day of class, which is June 25. So you'll have, you can complete the academic activity at any time, but if you want complete, full credit, you want to get it done by this Friday. But it's a very simple discussion post and a 1-question survey. I'll pop it open a little bit later. Now, Module B next Tuesday, that's when we will roll up our sleeves and start talking about business law. What I want to do there is provide you the big picture. I want to introduce you to the main sources of business law, beginning with state and local law, continuing with federal law, federal legislation, and presidential executive orders, decisions of the United States Supreme Court, and then concluding with public and private international law, treaties, custom, and agreements among parties that are who are located in different countries. So we're going to have 3 main sources of law, and I will talk about those next Tuesday. Then 2 weeks from today, I'll open up Module C, our 3rd module. That will be devoted to something called the common law. The common law is the single most unique aspect of our North American legal environment. The common law is something that stretches all the way back to Roman law, though it was more fully developed during the Middle Ages in England. And the common law, what the common law is, our background or backdrop of legal rules that apply by default to every business entity operating in the United States. So the main 3 areas of common law that I will identify and that we'll take a look at are property rights, contracts, and something lawyers call torts, or accidents and injury law. And so those 3 areas of law, like I said, provide the backdrop or the background of legal rules that apply to every single business, whether you're talking about a mega business like Amazon, or whether you're talking about, small mom and pop landscaping business or a lemonade stand and everything in between. So the common law is a very, very special and important area of private law. Then 3 weeks from today, we're going to talk about what I consider to be the single most important area of business law. And that is, I call it the law of ideas, but it's the formal label is intellectual property or intellectual property rights. Here, we're going to look at patents, trade secrets, trademarks, and copyrights. This is the most important area of law because this is really what explains how a business becomes successful. Mark Zuckerberg is a good idea where he stole intellectual property, from his classmates at Harvard. Jeff Bezos and Google, they developed their own intellectual property in the form of patents and trade secrets to develop their websites. Both of those companies, Facebook, Google, and I should say Meta platforms, Google and Amazon, they also license or buy intellectual property rights from third parties. Facebook, as you may be aware, owns Instagram. They bought, legally, they fully bought out the legal rights to Instagram. So think about it. If you were the developer of Instagram, right? And you sold those rights to Facebook, to Mark Zuckerberg, right? You'd be a very rich person right now. So the law of ideas, intellectual property rights, is the single most important area of business. And it's really most relevant, not just to entrepreneurs who are developing startups and new business models, but also even to established existing firms and their decision as to whether to invest in R&D and innovation and develop and launch new products. So, that's going to be our fourth module. Then 4 weeks from today, our next to last module, E, civil and criminal cases. This is probably what comes to mind when you're thinking of the law, or even business law. You're probably thinking of cases. Like maybe you're following Johnny Depp's lawsuit against Amber Heard. Maybe you were following the criminal prosecution of Derek Chauvin, the police officer who killed George Floyd last year, when that case went to trial. So we're going to take a look at civil and criminal cases, though. The reason why I say that towards the end of the class is because you're going to see, with the exception of those type of cases, those type of famous cases, most ordinary business cases, both criminal and civil, most of those cases either get plea bargained if they're criminal, or they get settled out of court if they're civil cases, or they're submitted to alternate methods of dispute resolution. So I'll talk about that. I'll explain how the legal system really works and why. When I say most cases, I actually mean almost 98%, of all cases, civil and criminal, end up never going to a jury. They end up either getting dismissed or settled out of court, or in the case of a criminal case, plea bargained. So we'll take a look at that in that area. And then our last module, 5 weeks from today, it will be ethics and corporate governance. We'll take a look at the different ways you can do business and the large question of, does a business firm, does a corporation, for example, do they have any ethical or social responsibility to the larger public? And we'll take a look at that. If you answer we're going to see there's two answers to that question, and if you answer it in the affirmative, yes, that business do owe ethical obligations, let's say to society or to beyond the business itself, then we'll try to ask, well, how do you determine what those ethical obligations are? We'll also take a look at a pending piece of legislation proposed by AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in the House, and Elizabeth Warren, the senator of Massachusetts in the Senate. The two most liberal members, perhaps, of the United States Congress. They've introduced an interesting bill called the Accountable Capitalism Act that would, if enacted, and I don't know if it, is going to get enacted, before the midterm election, becomes enacted, and this would be the time to do it while the Democrats control. It would create a remarkable change in existing common law of how businesses operates and how they're regulated. So we'll take a look at that, because even if the Accountable Capitalism Act doesn't become law, it generates some very important questions that are worth discussing and considering, regardless of what happens to that bill. Very important questions. So that's what we're going to be talking about at a very high level of abstraction. This is just an orientation today, but once we get into our 5 labs, we'll have 5 modules, each one devoted to a different area of the law, beginning with the main sources of business law, then continuing with the common law, the background rules that apply to all business firms, then going on with the law of ideas, intellectual property rights, and why that's the single most area of business law. Then civil and criminal cases. What happens if a company gets sued? What happens if a company has to sue to enforce its rights? And finally, looking at business ethics and corporate governance and the modern debate about what obligation do businesses have, generally speaking. All right, now, in terms of course logistics, in terms of grading, what I've done is your grade will consist of 3 areas. One will be, and I've included a link in the chat, every class, because attendance is technically required, what I do is I don't waste time taking attendance. I just assign a survey for each one of the classes. That is your attendance. And so I'll try to assign, there'll be 6 surveys, 1 per class. And they probably will add up to 300 points. So as long as you get, do 5 of this, you'll have full credit for this 1/3 of your grade. The next third of your grade is every module will have a series of 1 discussion post or 1 quiz or some combination thereof. And like I say, open up each of them, beginning next Tuesday, I'll open up each of the modules on a Tuesday and it give you a full week until the following Monday, 11:59 p.m. to complete your discussion post or your quiz or both. Either way, it will be open book, no time limit. I'm not going to get into student disabilities and start giving people extra time. So you can take whatever time you need. The point is I want to test you that you've been following the reading in that module. So that's why it's open book, just to give you an incentive to complete any reading assignment that I give. Finally, the last part of your grade will be a final project. And depending on the size of the course, I may allow you to do this individually, or I may require that you work with one other student. That will depend on the size of the course, and based on the number of graduate teaching assistants that I have this semester. Now, the final project is a very simple 5-page report. What you're going to do is decide what do you want to do after you or your partner, or you yourself if you're working alone. What do you want to do after college? Who do you want to work for? What would be your ideal dream job? And you're going to write a report about that company. And that report, what you're going to do is you're going to apply the 5 things that we're talking about in this class, intellectual property, common law, civil and criminal cases, corporate governance and ethics, and sources of law. You're going to apply that to your company. So I'm going to ask you, for example, very open-ended, what is that company's most important piece of intellectual property? What is that company's most important contractual relationship? What is the company's most serious or significant case, litigation that it is involved in? What is that company? What is the law, single most important law that applies to that company? And so on and so forth. So we have 5 areas. I'll ask you 5 things about that company. Oh, and finally, what is that company's ethical vision, if any? So, and what you'll do is you'll have a chance to apply everything I talk about in this class to the company that you want to work for. The idea is that really something that you can use after you finish the summer A, something that maybe you can even attach to your resume, or maybe try to get an interview at that company by demonstrating that you have a genuine interest in that company, that you've even done a research report, about the company that you'd like to work for after you work at after you graduate. If you want to start your own company, that's fine too. there, I'll have some special set of instructions for those that want to work in the nonprofit area, or those that want to do their own startup, their own company. That's fine as well. I'll provide it, but it's basically the same 5 things. All right. Again, I'll say more details in the syllabus about the final project. And normally I post the final project during our 4th class. That way we've covered at least, 3 of the 5 things, you know what I mean? And you can start working on your final project, just based on what you've learned in, by coming to class. So that's in terms of class logistics. Now you notice 1/3, 1/3, right? 1/3, this all adds up to 99%. The last percent of your grade is your academic activity. That's why you do want to get your academic activity done by Friday, because think about it, right? 1%, right? That can round up, if you get it done, that can round up your grade in the case you're ever on one of those thresholds, between a B plus and an A, or between a C plus and a B, or a B and a B plus. So you want to get done the academic activity. What I'll do now is, as a matter of fact, is I'll go and show you on the homepage. Now, maybe you completed the academic activity, but I notice probably about 1/3 of the class has done the academic activity. That's the only thing you have to do this week. I've specifically made this week very easy. I know many of you had finals as late as the beginning of May. I know, why don't we just ease into summer A, right? We'll do our academic activity. We have our orientation today, and then Tuesday we'll jump into the material. But for now, what I want you to do is part 1, if you haven't done it already. Part 1, very simple, just introduce yourself. You'll see here, I've written a short introduction about, I went to college at the University of California at Santa Barbara, and I went to law school at Yale University. And a little bit about my background, I practiced corporate law for a few years until I got my first teaching job. And so, but you'll see some of your classmates have already replied in here, and people have replied to each other. What you want to do is maybe do a search, find out maybe there's somebody from a city where you are from, or maybe shares your major, or maybe shares some interests. So that's the idea here, if you want to make friends. And this is a good place to start looking for a potential partner for your, for your group project. So this is just the idea here. You get to know one another. And the other part of the final project, which we'll go ahead and take a look at right now, is just a quick survey. It's why the syllabus isn't posted yet. I like to have a theme of the course, and I would have added a couple of new documentaries I just saw on Netflix. One called Downfall, about Boeing. The other called Hot White, about Abercrombie and Fitch. But I didn't, that was, I just saw those. But here, let's go to our survey statistics here. This is the, if you haven't done it, you want to do part 2 of your academic activities, you want to tell me what the theme of the course should be. So I've selected 3 movies. One is JFK, starring Kevin Costner. The other is The Social Network, starring Jesse Eisenberg and Andrew Garfield, among others, and Justin Timberlake. Actually, it's a great cast. And finally, Tiger King, which is a documentary. You actually have the real Joe Exotic, the real Carol Baskin. And let's just see what the class interest in here is so far. Here, this looks pretty solid in terms of participation. We have about half of the class has now completed the survey, but you can see the social network is edging out very close. As of Monday last night, and at the beginning of section 1, it was pretty much 50-50, but you can see. So what I probably will do is focus, as I finish the syllabus, I'll focus mostly on Facebook and social media, and maybe have one of the modules devoted to Tiger King. Depending on the results of this academic activity, I will ask you, next week's assignment will be to watch The Social Network if these results hold up. Tiger King were to win, it was actually winning up until like 90 minutes ago and last night. If Tiger King will win, I will tell you which episodes to watch. It's now 2 seasons, but there are a couple of episodes that are better than others in terms of legal environment and ethical environment of business. I'll tell you which episodes those are. In order to even it out, The Social Network is about a 2-hour movie. Tiger King, 2 seasons, but I'll select about 2 hours worth of episodes just to keep it, so there's no favorites. JFK is it's Oliver Stone's magnum opus. It's considered his best movie ever made. Unfortunately it's a 3-hour movie because with a very interesting question here of Kevin Costner is depicting a district attorney of New Orleans. He is the only DA to bring involving conspiracy involving the assassination of John F. Kennedy. The government's official position, the Warren Report, is that this was a lone gunman. This was Lee Harvey Oswald acting alone. I mention this because, the government, we consider the government is basically, whether it's the courts or the Congress or the legislature, right, as main sources of law. But what happens when it's the government who's lying to us about something as important as the assassination of beloved President? You know what I mean? So I throw that out. I throw that into the mix, and we'll take a look at something called the Zapruder film. Though I don't know if I'll show the Zapruder film in class because it's pretty graphic. It's the home movie of the murder of the president. But the Zapruder film was involved in a very high stakes legal battle that I'll talk about when we look at cases and civil and criminal cases. I'll take a look at the criminal case against the potential co-conspirators, if there were any, that was very controversial at the time, it still is. And the Zapruder case, what happened there when the government decided to basically buy the legal rights to the Zapruder film, the most famous home movie of all time, So any one of these are good choices. I just wanted to show you that your assignments for this week are very simple, very easy. All right, now this takes me to the last thing I want to do, then I'll open it up to questions, comments, or concerns, is there is an in-class survey. I have posted the link in the chat. I'll go ahead and repost it in here in case you need it, in case you can't find it or it's way up on the top. So let me just go ahead and repost the link to the survey. I had incorrectly posted the teacher version, and so that's why the first link didn't work. I apologize for that, as I was in the teacher modality, the instructor modality. So with that, let me just go ahead and pull up that survey, and then I can go ahead and do a screen share. This is our in-class survey. All right, here we are. I'll pull up those statistics. And first of all, my first question in this survey, which I should have posted it with the academic activity. It's regarding logistics, what you prefer. We're supposed to meet in person. I'm only, the orientation can be by Zoom is what I was told. But the College of Business wants this class to meet in person to promote engagement. So, but, it is summer A, you know what I mean? And I want to get student input here. And it's about, as you can see here, I think we have 90% of the class has participated here. We have about more than 2/3 would prefer, but less than 3/4 would prefer that I continue in the Zoom modality. Now, that's something that I'm going to take then when I'm working on the syllabus now, since there is a preference for Zoom. At the same time, those of you who want face-to-face, I need to figure out some face-to-face engagement, some opportunities for those of you who would like to meet face-to-face. But these results, and I think this is most of the class, these results are going to hold up. I'm going to take that into account as I design my syllabus, and most likely then I'm going to go ahead and provide a Zoom option. Even if I do have face-to-face class, I'll provide a Zoom option for those of you who prefer the Zoom. The remaining questions just have to do, what I want to show you with these remaining questions are examples, whether you voted for the Social Network, whether you are more interested in Tiger King, or whether you're like me, a big conspiracy theory buff, and you're fascinated by JFK. I want to show you some examples of real live controversies and how lawyers look at the controversies, So one is something that affects all of us. We all use social media in one form or another. Here I have some of the more popular social media logos. So what's interesting is, of course, you have the famous ones there like Facebook and Instagram, right? Both of them owned by the Meta platform, by Zuckerberg. Um, you have up and coming like Twitter and TikTok, very popular. Snapchat, I understand, is very popular. I don't understand it, but it's very popular. You have some dying social media sites here like LinkedIn and Pinterest, right? Who uses that anymore? Maybe, you know what I mean? I mean, a couple people do Tumblr, right? Um, WhatsApp. WhatsApp is a social media, right? It allows you to connect to other people, and allows you to avoid, roaming and international phone charges. You know what I mean? Because it's internet based. And then YouTube, which is owned by Google. Technically, it's a social media platform in that people upload their videos, and then anybody else, unless you set your link to private, anybody else can access those videos. So it's technically a social media platform. And what's really interesting is that at least before Elon Musk bought Twitter, and that deal has yet to be formalized, but there were very credible allegations that Zuckerberg at Facebook, Google at YouTube, Twitter, Jack Dorsey and the new guys that are running the company. There are a lot of allegations of bias in terms of and censorship. You know what I mean? So that's what this question is about. Should the protections of free speech of the First Amendment extend? Notice I'm not asking does it extend? The answer to that question is no. These are privately owned business firms. These are privately owned social media platforms. And therefore, under something we'll see next week, under something called the state actor doctrine, right? The Constitution does not apply to private actors. It only applies to the government. Only the government can violate your free speech rights. That's why, UCF, Google, right? You have no privacy in your Gmail. You have no privacy in your Knight's Mail, right? The courts have deemed that there's no reasonable expectation of employees have no, reasonable expectation of privacy. If you click on a terms of use, giving access, to the company, providing you the email service, no reasonable expectation of privacy. But is that right? Should that be the case? Should we have free speech and privacy rights on these social media platforms? Here, what's really remarkable here is what you see here is, considering we have, 80% of the class, 90, 80%, we have a pretty decent sample size. We have over 90%. This is what you would call a landslide. If this were, and so this is a remarkable result. And I will tell you though, even though the current law, the way it's being enforced is that you have no First Amendment, no privacy, no searches, you have no rights when it comes to a private company. There is an important exception. That exception, and this is a good case study of how the legal system works. You always have a general rule, like the state actor doctrine. The Constitution only applies to the government, not to private business companies. But the exception is, it's called the public function exception. If the company is doing work on behalf of the government contractor, for example, or if the government is providing a public service, public function, then and only then courts are able to make an exception and say that constitutional rights do apply against the private business firm because they're providing a public function. Right now, this case is literally in the courts. None other than former President Donald J. Trump, 45 if you prefer. He brought a lawsuit back in July of 2021, about 10 months ago, against Twitter and against Facebook, now Meta, alleging that his free speech rights were abridged when they deplatformed him. That is to say, when they censored him or kicked him off those social media platforms. And his argument, or the argument of his lawyers, are public function exception, right? And it's not, contrary to what most of my liberal law professor colleagues have dismissed the lawsuit as frivolous. I give it a 50-50% if not a 60-40% probability prevailing, because everybody seems to agree that these companies do provide a major public service, that they're even referred to as even liberal law professors will talk about a digital public square, and here I'm calling out my own professor, Jack Balkin at Yale, who likes to talk about a digital public square. So to me, it's not a stretch, Trump's argument that, hey, you know what I mean? Even though these social media companies are not being paid by the government to provide, a platform for political discourse, they are nonetheless, right? The platform is being used to discuss political ideas, right? And, political advertising and all that and whatnot. And so maybe a court might rule in favor of the public function exception here. Now, I say maybe, at best, this is, I say 60-40, really, to be honest, it's 50-50. I have no idea. But, this is probably going to go all the way up to the United States Supreme Court, probably before the 2024 election, right? And that probably is going to be the single most important case decided that year. So I want to let you know that one more thing, though. As a lawyer, what we are trained to do, what we're supposed to do is we're supposed to play devil's advocate. We're supposed to anticipate possible objections to our argument. And so for those 92% of you, 211 of you, who actually would like, and I sympathize with you, we do want to extend free speech rights to social media. I tell you, that's going to come at a very high cost, because right now, because the First Amendment doesn't apply to these social media companies have developed their own content moderation policies. And what these content moderation policies basically do, right, is they censor you if you want to make derogatory remarks about somebody's gender or preferred pronouns or sex, or about their race or nationality, right? In other words, these private companies have very aggressive, if perhaps unevenly enforced, content moderation policies. But I'm telling you, under existing free speech law, something that we'll take a closer look at in our next class, if the class votes for social network, under existing free speech law, hate speech, unless it's accompanied with direct and imminent threat of physical force, hate speech is protected speech. So if you were to, if you're like Elon Musk and you want to have speech on your social media platform, that means you have to allow hate speech. You have to allow misogynist. You have to allow conspiracy theories. And maybe that's good. Maybe that's what we should be doing. I don't want to take sides on that right now. I think it's an open legal question. But I want to let you know that, free speech, right, has that potential cost. Maybe that's the way to go. Maybe, it's the marketplace of ideas, right? Who are we to decide what's true, what's false, right? Or maybe the court will change. Maybe the court will make hate speech a type of unprotected speech. Maybe they'll reverse their precedents as they're threatening to do with Roe versus Wade, right? Who knows what's going to happen? But I want to throw that out there, that's a major topic of debate today. It's why The Social Network is still a relevant movie and something that we'll discuss moving forward either way. The next survey question, this is just something that I have to share this with you because admittedly, of Kennedy assassination, I was born, many years after that, or 5 years after that. All of you were probably born, well after that, as well. I'm saying, like, none of memory of this, but I do remember going to school, and I do remember one of my civics or social studies teachers, explaining all the problems with the Warren Report. I remember as a kid, I was really dumbfounded. I was flabbergasted that the Warren Report had all of these weaknesses to it. Now, I gotta say, it's very controversial. Some people defend the Warren Report. Other people say the Warren Report, holes in it. But I found the possibility that the government could be lying to us to be a very disturbing one, right? When I was a kid, right? And you want to believe in your government, right? Here, what's interesting here, if you look at these results, it's amazing. It's not as much as our free speech results, but notice, right? 70, almost 3/4 of the class does believe there was, Warren Report was probably false. Probably there was a conspiracy. Probably Lee Harvey Oswald did not act alone. Now, I have to say, that said, there are literally dozens of different plausible conspiracy theories, right? And there's a lot of different discussions about what may or may not happen. Perhaps the most interesting of the conspiracy theories was the actual case that was brought in New Orleans back in 1969. So, that's, if you watch the movie JFK, that's what that movie is about. The one case to go to court, to go alleging a criminal conspiracy in the murder of our president. Now, I will say, that captured the assassination of our president, the first time it was shown in public. Why? Because it was a privately owned movie, owned by by that time, Time Life had bought the rights to the movie, and they decided not to let the public see the movie. Very controversial if you think about it, because that's an important piece of evidence. All right. The last question I have in this survey, by the way, I got one more unstable internet connection notice. I apologize for that. Again, if we get disconnected, stay on the line. I have a backup device, and I'll go ahead and just do the last part of the class. This is our last survey question, then I'll open it up to questions. Notice this has to do with Tiger King. Those of you who prefer Tiger King and the world of Joe Exotic. Let me just say something in favor of Tiger King. Tiger King has an eclectic collection of individuals. Some of the most haunting images and people I've ever seen in my life. People who really love these animals, and also people who have been accused of abusing their animals. And so it raises a lot of important questions. One of the consequences of the Tiger King is that Congress decided to consider this bill that Carol Baskin is promoting, called the Big Cat Public Safety Act. It would make it actually illegal to own a big cat or to buy or sell one. And now, what's interesting is the bill is still pending in the United States Senate, but it's already been approved by a wide bipartisan margin, something like 380 to 60, something like that. It's a very wide margin. It's already been approved in the House. And so here, what I'm asking, I'm not asking, do you approve or do you agree we should prohibit, private market, private buying and selling of big cats? What I'm asking you is, should this be decided at the state level or at the federal level? And something we'll talk about in more detail, regardless of what what the class theme is, in our next class when we look at sources of law. One of the advantages of doing something at the national level is you have a clear-cut rule that applies to everybody across the country. But one of the advantages of doing things at the state or local level is you have former Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis called laboratories of democracy, right? You have each state deciding for itself what rules and regulations to adopt. Now, from a business perspective, you might prefer a single rule at the national level, or you may prefer, because maybe business gets prohibited at the national level, regulated very heavily at the national level. So maybe then you prefer state and local regulation where you can operate in a jurisdiction that's more pro-business or less regulatory. You see what's going on here? But let me think what the class thinks here about big cats. And here, notice it's very, very close. If I were to ask, do you probably, do you support banning the ownership of big cats? Probably a lot of you would say, yeah, it's time to ban the ownership of big cats. Although that does raise a slippery slope question. Could Congress then ban the ownership of certain breeds of dogs or all private pets, right? That's an interesting what lawyers call a slippery slope. But let's debate what's the current bill on the table, which would just ban the ownership of big cats. Notice here, the class is more evenly divided. 44%, 101 students would say, no, keep this at the state and local level. Let's have these laboratories of democracy, you know what I mean? Where people can vote with your feet. If you want to own a big cat, state that allows you to own a big cat, but 56%, 129 students would say, no, let's have a national uniform rule for your country, right? And so each of these have their advantages and disadvantages, as we'll see in our next class. What's really interesting is that our common law tradition is by and large state and local law. It's decided at the state level by state court judges. So we have potentially wide variety in our common law tradition as to what the rules of contract, property, and torts accidents are. In reality, we have, I'll explain when we do our third module, we have, there's a tendency towards uniformity. I'll explain how many of the most important common law rules are more or less similar across the country, even though there might be some regional and state variation in some particular cases, which is why, you always have to consult a lawyer when you're a business operating across. All right, with that then, I will conclude our orientation class and open it up to questions, comments, or concerns. I believe, hopefully one of my teaching assistants has been in the chat addressing your comments and concerns.
I'm here.
Oh, great, great. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns I need to address?
Most of the questions are about what you were talking about, not the class. Like one person asked, is doxing also a form of protected speech? Doxing?
This is an excellent question. So doxing refers to, if I understand correctly, is what just happened with the Supreme Court justices, right? Publishing private, or I don't want to judge if it's private, quasi-private information like your address and phone number. This is actually, by the way, we could ask the same thing about revenge porn. Like, where do we draw the line, right? And generally speaking, what courts have done, and we'll see this in the common law, because one form of tort law that's very important, because there is no national privacy law in the United States, it's all state by state, is the invasion of privacy tort. And under our common law tradition, in most states, what a judge is going to ask is, do you have a reasonable expectation of privacy in your phone number or in your home address? And most of the time, depending on the context, especially if you're like a public celebrity, right, that kind of thing, most of the time, probably you do have a reasonable expectation of privacy in your phone number and in your home address. Notice, right, if it's a business phone number or a business address, right, that's a whole different question, right? You want the public to know your phone number. You want the public to know what, most likely, right, where your business is located, so they can buy goods and services from you. And this is actually a good lesson about the common law and about the legal system generally. The facts are just as important as the law. As we'll see, one of the things that we're going to learn is that a lot of our law, whether it's common law, federal law, state and local or international law, will consist of what lawyers call general standards, kind of formulas. Like, for example, do you have a reasonable expectation of privacy in your information? Because if you do, that may be considered, disclosure of that may be considered doxing or, an invasion of privacy, an actual tort giving rise to legal liability. And so notice the facts are very important in deciding whether, in fact, you do have a reasonable expectation of privacy. So generally speaking, one of the things you learn in law school is not just what the law is, but to apply the law to the facts. And that's something, that's why I do insist for our academic activity that we do choose a theme of the course, whatever that theme might be. Because that way we can all watch, let's say The Social Network wins, or let's say The Tiger King or JFK. We can all watch the relevant episode or the relevant movie. And then we can all then, see the facts for ourselves and see how the law works in reality. So doxing generally, and the thing I don't like about the word doxing, it's like gaslighting, right? We don't want to prejudge whether something is illegal or not, right? Whether something is quote unquote doxing, right? So the law to account a reasonable expectation of privacy standard, and then look at the actual facts, to determine whether in fact the information being disclosed, the private personal information being disclosed is in fact an invasion of privacy. But we'll say more about that in the common law, as that is a big area of common law. Let's see what else there is in the chat. Yes.
A lot of them are asking about the in-person versus Zoom.
Oh, okay, yes. Yeah.
And then if the lectures are on Zoom, if they'll be recorded.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's one advantage of the Zoom lectures, that I can go ahead and record them. You know what I mean? But you want to attend, you want to attend the lectures because I'm going to make the survey basically open only during class time. That's what I'm going to be doing. Today, I'll keep an exception. I'll keep it open until 59 p.m. As I'm learning to work with Canvas here. The one advantage of Zoom is that I will be recording. So yes, that will be that is yes. As I'm recording class as well. Any other
And
questions? Yes.
so this semester, just wanted to make sure, is attendance mandatory?
Yeah, that's one of the disadvantages of this format. Attendance is mandatory, and that's why I do the surveys. Basically, with the so-called real classes or RA, I think it's reduced seating adaptive learning is what it stands for. Attendance is supposed to be required for the 5 labs. So what I do is, I'll assign the surveys. Complete 5. You'll have full credit for attendance. So if it up to me, when it was lecture capture, you could watch the videos at home. You know what I mean? And by the way, I had a professional video producer, making very high quality videos of my lectures. But now we don't have that system anymore. So attendance is technically going to be required. This is one advantage of Zoom, right? That I can record it, you can watch it remotely, et cetera, et cetera. Anyone else? Any questions, comments, or concerns?
That's it.
Okay, fantastic. I think I may have seen in the chat, one of the interesting things, the UCF, because it's publicly funded, right? Compared to, let's say, Stetson, right? Which is a private university, right? So it's kind of interesting, right? Your rights as a student depend on what institution you're attending, right? Stetson, right? It's a private college. And so therefore, right, they're not a state actor. Now, they may be to some limited extent engaged in some public function. So maybe you could extend the public function exception, but you'd have to look at that on a case by case basis, right? Looking at the specific facts. Let's
Oh no, you froze again. I don't know if you want to go take her back up. If it takes too long, guys, I'll just dismiss, because this is like the end of the class anyway. If you guys have any more questions, you can put them in the chat too while we wait. No, all of the in-class activities are going to be during class time. And they will close at the end of class time. So don't try to wait till the end. The tests are we have the quizzes are taken online at home. There's no exams. There's just the final project at the end of the semester. And then, yeah, attendance is tracked based on the survey. So far, there isn't in person, but sometimes the deans, provosts, etc., will change that. So if they do, he will let you guys know. But right now, it's Zoom meetings. Working ahead, I think he said they're released weekly. The quizzes and attendance surveys and stuff, discussion posts, whatever, they're all released weekly. So like you can get ahead by about a week, but I don't know. He's back.
I apologize for that. I finally did get disconnected, but I have my backup device. But yeah, as I was saying, so that's where the state actor doctrine comes into play. But notice whether the public exception, courts considered a whole wide variety of factors, and then it's a very fact specific type of thing. But anyways, any other questions, comments, or concerns?
Somebody asked about the profile picture again.
Oh yeah,
they upload it to your account, to your web courses account.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, let me do that now, show you how that's done. I did mine back when I started teaching at UCF. So let me go ahead and do a screen share. This is for those of you who may need this. Maybe I'll do a tutorial on YouTube. But I think what you do is you just go here into account, and then probably you go into settings, if I'm not mistaken. And I think there you'll be able to, yeah, you'll be able to click on this, and then you'll upload your profile picture. Now, let me make it clear, right? If you have, for any, private, religion, whatever reasons you don't want to have a picture per se, you can have a, it's fine. You can have your pet, or if you have a logo of your favorite sports team, or whatever your favorite cartoon character, it could be whatever, as long as you have some kind of picture or image to personalize you. That's very, very important. As we're grading, we know who you are. And if I ever, I'm learning peer review modality here, so where you reply to your students. It's just good, it's just nice to know who, people, people's expression of their personalities. So that's the idea there, just to upload your picture. Most of you have already done it, just a few handful of the ones that I've graded so far. But as you can see, for this week, it's very simple. I've taken my foot off the gas. All you need to do is just complete the 2-part academic activity. Just introduce yourself. Tell me what you would like the theme of the course to be. I'll probably say a little bit about each of those things as the course moves forward. But for purpose for me assigning for next week, I'm going to assign one of those movies, one of those episodes, so that we can then have the same example going forward. So you can see the law in action, as lawyers like to, and judges like to say. All right, with that, I will stay on the line just in case anybody has any questions, comments, or concerns. I will be posting the syllabus. Most likely, I'm waiting to get a few more results, so I have some idea of what the theme of the course will be. And most likely no later than tomorrow. I was hoping to do it today, but I realized Tuesday is just too early. People are still doing the academic activity. With that, have a great rest of your day. I hopefully, most likely it'll be by Zoom. We'll meet in 1 week from today. And in the meantime, have a good week. God bless. Charge on.